We know that more than 880 people have crossed the English Channel in just one day last week. British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak actually wanted to stop illegal migration to Great Britain. But 2 weeks before the parliamentary elections, he is coming under increasing pressure. It is a life-threatening crossing in small boats across the English Channel to Great Britain. And last week's Tuesday, more than 880 people were registered taking this route. And this is the highest number recorded within one day this year. In total, 12,313 people have reached Great Britain across the Channel since the beginning of the year, which is 18% higher than at the same time last year. Back then, there were 10,472 people. The fact that so many people are making it to Great Britain this way again is not good news for British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. He has made migration one of the top issues in his election campaign for the parliamentary elections on July 4th and promised to stop the boats. To achieve this, the Conservative head of government wants people who have entered the country irregularly to be deported to Rwanda in the future without their asylum application being examined and regardless of their origin. And this plan should actually have been implemented long ago. Great Britain has already transferred the sum of something around 400 million pounds to the East African country. But nevertheless, with the exception of 2 who have left voluntarily because they got paid, not a single migrant has been deported there. And according to Sunak, this agreement is intended to have a deterrent effect. But there is no evidence of this so far. Experts doubt that it will stop migrants from attempting the dangerous crossing in small boats across the English Channel to Great Britain. And if Sunak is defeated in the British general election on July 4th, the deportations may never take place. The opposition Labour Party has a huge lead over Sunak's Tories in the polls and wants to overturn the asylum pact with Rwanda. The German Federal Ministry of the Interior has now asked experts to what extent asylum procedures can be outsourced to third countries such as Rwanda. And according to information from media, many of those interviewed have serious doubts. This spring, a group of experts gradually came to the Federal Ministry of the Interior. Lawyers, people in charge of think tanks and non-governmental organizations, representatives from Denmark and Great Britain. And they were all supposed to help the federal government to give orientation in a rather heated debate. And the simple keyword for this is indeed Rwanda. Because the Federal Ministry of the Interior is supposed to answer one question. Can Germany outsource asylum procedures to other countries and thereby reduce the number of people seeking protection and perhaps also the number of deaths along the migration routes? A total of 28 experts were interviewed. Their assessments were obtained from 21 of them for a research, and some of the written statements are also available to our press. But Rwanda, well, that's almost impossible according to experts. According to this, the legal and above all the actual hurdles for outsourcing asylum procedures abroad are very high. Outsourcing to a country like Rwanda is considered almost impossible by almost all those who were heard and whose position is available. And according to participants, the Ministry of the Interior repeatedly asked urgently about possible legal basis for outsourcing. And participants interpret this to mean that government officials do not automatically consider legal feasibility to be a given. Analysis of the presentations and the reports by the experts at the ministry shows that almost all of them have serious doubts about outsourcing models such as those being promoted by Great Britain with Rwanda or by Italy with Albania. The reason for this is less legal questions than those of costs and benefits. Asylum centers abroad, as the majority of experts agree, are expensive and inefficient. Only very few people could actually be brought abroad using such a structure. And if states can be found at all that can promise security and are willing to accept asylum seekers from Europe. and many of those interviewed also consider that point unlikely. And last but not least, the majority of the 21 migration experts whose assessments are available to media warn of the serious ethical, human rights and political consequences of such outsourcing plans. The lawyer Pauline Endres de Oliveira from the Humboldt University, for example, writes in her statement that it is hardly conceivable in practice that this type of extraterritorial procedure can be carried out in a way that complies with human rights and that essential procedural guarantees are observed. And the political scientist Volker Heinz from the Bielefeld University even writes of a wrong path. If one follows the expert statements, then the Italian model hardly plays a role there, since migrants from international waters are to be brought directly to Albania. On the other hand, the Rwandan principle was examined more closely, with the possibility of people being flown out to a third country directly from Germany. But according to the experts, asylum procedures in third countries are possible under very specific conditions. For this to happen, the Geneva Refugee Convention and the EU Human Rights Convention must be complied with by the third country. For example, there must be no risk that people will subsequently be sent back to third countries where they are in danger. An EU member state such as Germany is bound by EU law or the Asylum Procedures Directive. The so-called connection criterion has so far been laid down in this, and this means that a person could only be sent back against their will to a third country to which they have a connection. A simple transit with a short stay is not enough for this. A softening of this connection criterion is currently being discussed at European level. However, this would still involve many obligations. That was said by the lawyer Nora Marquardt from the University of Münster in her statement, my hometown, by the way. It would remain subjection to EU standards. And the representatives of the Council of Experts emphasized in their analysis that a possible waiver of the connection element is probably possible, but a human rights case-by-case examination remains necessary. And there are significantly more arguments against outsourcing than for it. Not without the use of considerable resources that all could happen. And even if the question of the connection to a country were put aside by law, the requirements to ensure a fair and efficient procedure and the protection of people abroad would remain high. And this was explained by the Potsdam lawyer Andreas Zimmermann. If at all, these could only be ensured by the expenditure of considerable resources, he says. And by resources, Zimmermann means that Germany would have to use its own staff to continuously monitor and support the country to which it deports asylum seekers, and so that they are not deported from there. This in turn would probably mean a great deal of effort for the already overburdened Federal Office for Migration and Refugees. That's the BAMF. And the BAMF president Hans-Eckert Sommer is said to have pointed this out internally. He was also invited as an expert, but did not want to comment on his presentation when media asked him. And many other experts also referred to the considerable costs that such models would incur. In his hearing, Raphael Bosson from the German Institute for International and Security Affairs described the sums estimated or already spent in Italy and Great Britain to send asylum seekers away as disproportionate. And according to the research, it was primarily two of the experts interviewed who emphasized the opportunities of outsourcing. The social scientist Gerald Knaus has long argued that the effort to comply with all the rules would be worthwhile, because only a few asylum seekers would have to be brought to such third countries, and many would be deterred and not even set off, so the same that Sunak says. What Knaus considers a prerequisite, however, is that the asylum seekers would have to be identified at the EU's external border. He believes that transferring them after they are already in Germany is out of the question. The legal options were highlighted by the Constance legal scholar Daniel Thym, and according to him, this would require some changes to the law, such as the correction of the connection criterion I talked about earlier in this video. And he also notes that the BAMF in Germany must first make a decision. Current procedures take 3 to 4 months, during which the applicant is effectively allowed to move freely within the federal territory. Tim sees a possible way out of this dilemma in outsourcing to clearly safe neighboring countries such as Turkey or Serbia, but not Rwanda. In this case, a procedure could possibly be dispensed with altogether. So it's a very complicated topic and a very controversial one. And you can have a lot of views on this, but the legal part has to be followed and the Geneva Convention has to be followed in the end. And if you want to know more, the next video is right here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.